This is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Good morning and welcome to Houston Newsmakers. It has been an active week in the world of politics as the reality has been sinking in on everyone that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States. The transition team tasked with preparing the Trump administration to take over seems to be getting off to a less than smooth start, something the president-elect says via Twitter was actually a very smooth process. Joining me this morning to talk about all of this, Professor Jim Granado, the Executive Director of the Hobby Center for Public Affairs at the University of Houston, and Joe Barnes, the Bonner Means Baker Research Fellow at the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. Thank you both for being here. Lots to talk about in the wake of this election. We've been watching the transition activities. What do each of you make of what's been going on? Is this normal transition policy? I've seen some reports where, depending on what the administration is, sometimes it can take a short time, sometimes a lot longer. What have you been noticing?
The data suggests, if you go back to even the Nixon administration, that right now they're still doing fine in terms of appointing people. I mean, there's this tension between getting things done right, but doing due diligence. So to me, I would wait a couple more weeks if you see nothing going on, then you'd start to say, okay, they don't have their act together.
It's tough to kind of figure it out, though, because there's no real consistent stream of information coming. Is how do we really know?
Well, yeah, and the other thing I think we have to recall is that Trump it really is an outsider in many ways. And unlike a lot of previous president-elects, he doesn't have a huge bench, right, of people in think tanks or former government officials that endorsed him and are therefore obvious candidates for the various positions. So yes, he is a bit different than most president-elects.
And from what I've been reading, and by the way, I wish I could be in each one of your classes, just because this is a fascinating time of the year, but I've been understanding that sometimes it takes as many as 4,000 appointees to get the job done as far as the administration is concerned. It's got to start from the top and work its way down. But you hit upon something. When you have the number of people, the Republican Party was really split about this particular candidate. So you don't have maybe the same number of people who are jumping at the bit to kind of serve in that administration. Is that a fair statement?
I agree with Joe. I mean, I think the institutional memory, the experience that you would see in typical administration, you have a lot of quote-unquote insiders, would help grease the wheel, make things happen pretty quickly.
He was saying he's an outsider, so wouldn't that in fact be something that he would want to avoid? Not having many insiders, but if you don't have insiders, that's a problem because the government works a lot different than business does.
Well, it does, and there's also just a simple fact that you need people that can just get the job done on a day-to-day basis. You need people that can go to their inbox and move the stuff in their inbox to their outbox. You need people to take negotiations, to do legislation, to draft legislation, to coordinate with the Congress. There's just a huge amount of machinery in the executive branch, and you need some people who know how to do it.
Let's talk about the appointment of Reince Priebus as Chief of Staff and Steve Bannon as Chief Strategist. It seems like Priebus is, on the surface of things, looks like a pretty good choice because he knows the people. That's part of the standard. But Steve Bannon is a little bit different kind of guy. Obviously, he's loyal to Mr. Trump. When he came on, the campaign really kind of took a different track, would you say?
Right. I mean, so the Bannon appointment strikes me as a little bit tone deaf because of the blowback they've already gotten. That's unnecessary. I mean, so that appointment, to me, raises red flags about the recruitment process, what they're doing inside. The previous appointment, though, is going to satisfy a lot of folks inside the Republican Party, in particular people like Paul Ryan, who President Trump is going to have to work with.
Should we, I mean, it's Chief Strategist, what does that mean? And how big of a job is it, and why should people really care? I mean, obviously, there's you say red flag, but what is it about that job that makes it a red flag kind of appointment?
Well, I mean, I would guess that what he is sort of going to be the #1 political advisor to the new president. And that's because, in point of fact, you can't divide policy from politics. Presidents always have political advisors, formal or informal. Karl Rove, Axelrod, I think, for Obama. And so these are the people you go to when you want to say, how will what I'm thinking of doing play with the public? How can I use legislation and public announcements to advance our political objectives?
I think one of the things you said about the red flag part was that because during the campaign there were a lot of red meat that was tossed out. Donald Trump was not shy about saying a lot of things. And Bannon was kind of really associated with a lot of things that had to do with that. Breitbart is one of those publications that's put a lot of provocative titles out there.
Correct.
So that close to the White House, you said that's not really necessarily going to be a uniting factor, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, Priebus and Bannon supposedly have worked well together so far, and Priebus publicly has stated he's endorsed Bannon. But the question is, because they work together, is there going to be this friction? And I also add, consider also Kellyanne Conway having some influence as this goes forward. I would say she is going to have a considerable influence in what goes forward, and we'll see what kind of title she gets as well.
What do you make of that? I mean, it looked like that mix of folk, they're really headstrong, really, but Kellyanne Conway seemed to provide a little calming mix to perhaps. Did you notice that at all, or what do you make of her contribution?
Well, I mean, she appears to have helped, calm things down, stop, there was a huge amount of turmoil within the campaign, and she, I think, helped to stop that, right?
Yeah.
There's also some precedent for having the White House staff at the top have a mixture, a troika. You had, during Reagan administration, Jim Baker, Michael Deaver, and Ed Meese together working. Jim Baker was the man who called the organizational shots, but you had Meese and also Deaver dealing with certain issues in the White House as well.
One of the things, this campaign was obviously a bruising one, not only the part from after the conventions, the general, but also in the Republican primary. You might remember that at the end of that primary, Mr. Trump was pretty vocal about Senator Cruz. He insulted, basically, he insulted Mr. Cruz's wife. He insinuated that Mr. Cruz's father had something to do with the assassination of JFK. There was no love lost between them. That was then. This is Senator Cruz this week.
The American people loudly and overwhelmingly said the path we're on, it isn't working, and we want to chart a new path. And Republicans have been entrusted with the responsibility of leading not only the White House, but the Senate and the House of Representatives. That is a tremendous opportunity, but it also carries with it an obligation that we've got to deliver. We've got to stand up and actually produce on the conservative promises we made to the voters, and I look forward to helping lead the effort to make that happen.
You read anything into that? I mean, I've heard some rumors about him taking a role as maybe Attorney General. When I heard that, are professional politicians able to really bury the hatchet that well? I mean, that was pretty personal. When you talk about your wife and your father.
It depends on the person, but these people are politicians, and the object of a politician is to get and exercise power on behalf of the policies they believe best. And I will note that Senator Cruz, whatever you think of him, is not the first politician to somehow change his opinion. This has been known to happen on other occasions.
Mr. Trump made a lot of promises. Some of them align with Republican principles, some of them not. What do you make of the challenge of combining his philosophy of how we should go forward and his party's philosophy, which can be kind of different? Well,
they got to hit the ground running, work on the things that he and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell agree on. That's Obamacare, maybe the Iran deal, tax reform. The things that you want to steer away from is going to be trade, because he and Ryan do not agree on that. So wait until later to deal with that. I'd also add to be some issues in immigration. I hear Ryan signaling that he's willing to put the wall up first, or something like a wall, do border security first, and then deal with the other issues later. Well, that's going to be one of the hot button issues right off the top, is it not? I mean, we do have people who are still marching in the streets against this. So maybe in terms of not necessarily trying to get off to a smooth start, but a different kind of start. Well, look, there's no doubt, there's a lot of reasons why Donald Trump became president. We were just discussing this before we came on. There's dozens of reasons. You could go down a dozen, but clearly his early and very, very tough language about immigration, I think, was the thing that sort of got him traction. He may have to compromise, but I think this is an important issue for him. There's certain things he can do without the Congress, but a lot of it's going to depend on congressional support.